It was supposed to be a routine parent-teacher meeting at Oakdale Public High School, a place where parents voiced concerns, applauded their children's achievements, and shared ideas about building a better school community. But tonight was different. Because seated quietly in the back row, barely noticed at first, was Barron Trump, invited as a guest speaker to talk about civic engagement and respectful dialogue in schools. It was his first time ever attending a public PTA forum. No Secret Service in sight, just him, no red carpet, no spotlight. And up front, standing near the microphone with a stack of notes and a nervous but determined look, was Emily Harper, a single mom of two, lifelong conservative, and lifelong believer in faith, discipline, and the American flag. Her voice trembled slightly as she spoke. "I just think, maybe instead of teaching kids to question everything, we could teach them to stand for something again. Like respect, family, and yes, maybe even prayer." A few parents in the front row rolled their eyes. One father let out an audible sigh, but she kept going, stronger now. "My kids don't need to be told they're privileged because of their skin color. They need to know they're loved, protected, and held accountable." That was the moment the room shifted. A woman in a rainbow scarf leaned forward and snapped, "This isn't a political rally, Mrs. Harper." Emily turned, startled. "I wasn't talking politics. I was talking values." And then, loud enough for the whole room to hear, someone from the panel at the front table muttered, "Maybe you should sit down. You're not welcome here with that kind of mindset." The room gasped. Emily froze. And Barron Trump slowly stood up, his eyes calm, his posture firm, his voice still silent, but not for long. All eyes turned toward the tall young man in the back row. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't slam his hands. He simply walked down the aisle, slow and steady, like he had done this 100 times before. But this wasn't a political rally or a press event. This was a school meeting. And yet, his presence alone shifted the air. The woman in the rainbow scarf squinted, visibly irritated. "Oh, so we're just letting political figures take the mic now?" She scoffed. But Barron wasn't heading to the podium. Not yet. He stopped right beside Emily Harper, who was still standing, clutching her notes, her breath shaky but her spine straight. He turned to the panel at the front. "Is this how you treat parents who show up?" he asked, voice calm, but with a sharp edge that cut through the tension like a knife. "By shutting them down when they say something that makes you uncomfortable?" The moderator, a middle-aged man in a navy blazer with an enamel "Equity First" pin, cleared his throat. "Mr. Trump, this meeting is about collaboration, not division. And frankly, your name alone carries certain baggage." The room fell into stunned silence. Emily's eyes widened. Barron didn't flinch. "So we're judging people by their names now?" he asked. "Is that what your school teaches these kids?" A few quiet murmurs rippled through the crowd. Some parents shifted in their seats. A teacher near the back folded her arms defensively. Then, out of nowhere, a younger father stood up. "Let the man speak. I may not agree with everything his family says, but this mom didn't do anything wrong." More murmurs followed. One mom nodded. Another clapped just once, uncertain. The atmosphere had shifted again, but this time, toward something heavier. Emily looked up at Barron, her voice barely above a whisper. "Why are you defending me?" He didn't look at her. He just answered softly, "Because someone has to." And with that, he stepped forward toward the mic, toward the panel, and toward whatever storm was coming next. The microphone screeched slightly as Barron stepped forward, but he didn't flinch. His hands rested loosely on the sides of the podium, not clenched, not theatrical, just steady. Before he could speak, however, a woman in the second row abruptly stood. She wore a designer blazer, thick glasses, and a lanyard with the school's PTA badge proudly displayed. Her tone was sharp, rehearsed. "This is not the place for political theater," she said, cutting through the room like a judge slamming a gavel. This is a school, Mr. Trump. A place of learning, not lecturing. Barron didn't blink. I agree, he said simply. But when a parent is publicly humiliated for defending basic values like respect, prayer, or family, someone needs to ask, what exactly are we teaching? Before the woman could respond, the school principal finally rose from his chair behind the table. Mr. Aldridge Balding, slim, suit a size too big, cleared his throat with theatrical annoyance. This forum, he said, gesturing toward the room, is about progress, understanding, and inclusion. We do not tolerate disruptive rhetoric. Mrs. Harper, you've made your views known, perhaps too clearly, and Mr. Trump, your presence is unorthodox at best. The silence was no longer quiet, it was tense. You say inclusion, Barron replied, but what you really mean is agreement. Because if someone disagrees with you, even respectfully, you call it disruptive. Emily, still standing off to the side, was visibly overwhelmed now, her hands trembling, her notes clutched tighter than before. But there was something else in her eyes too, gratitude. The room was split, some faces were stone cold, others unsure. But some, especially in the back, looked like they were hearing the truth for the first time in a long time. And just then, the PTA badge woman scoffed. Of course you'd say that. You've never had to fight for anything real in your life. Barron finally looked up from the podium. I fight every day, he said quietly, not for headlines, not for applause, but for people like her. He didn't raise his voice. But for the first time that night, no one dared interrupt him. Mr. Aldridge adjusted his glasses, trying to regain control of the room. His voice was sharper, now less official, more personal. You speak so confidently, Mr. Trump, he began, folding his arms. But you're not a parent. You don't understand the complexities we face in this school. You come here, name-dropping values, as if that alone qualifies you to lecture real educators and struggling families. He took a slow step forward, addressing the crowd now. And let's be honest, if your last name wasn't Trump, would anyone even be listening? A few nods echoed in the front rows, some even clapped. Barron remained still, his gaze steady on the man. He didn't flinch. He didn't respond immediately. Instead, he looked at Emily. She was watching him now not as a political symbol, but as a young man who had chosen to stand next to her when no one else did. And that's when Barron turned back to the room. You're right, he said. I'm not a parent. I don't have children in this school, but I do have eyes and ears, and a spine. A hush fell again. He scanned the room slowly, letting the silence linger before continuing. I came here tonight to talk about respectful conversation in education. And yet, I watched a mother get shouted down for expressing her beliefs. Not because she was wrong, but because they made you uncomfortable. He paused. You talk about struggle as if it's a membership card. But maybe real strength isn't about credentials. It's about standing for someone else when it costs you something. The principal stiffened, his jaw tightened. And from the back row, a quiet voice called out, "Let him finish." All eyes turned. It was a janitor mid-50s, still holding his mop handle like a cane, nodding slowly, voice hoarse. Man speaking truth. Let him finish. No one moved. And Barron did not waste the moment. Barron stepped back slightly from the podium, as if to invite the next voice, not to silence it. The silence that followed wasn't empty, it was loaded with anticipation. Emily looked down at the notes still shaking in her hands, then slowly folded them, placed them on the nearby table, and took a single step forward. Her voice cracked at first, but this time not from fear. I didn't come here tonight to start a war, she said, eyes glancing across the crowd. I came to ask why our kids are being taught that loving their country is something to be ashamed of. Several faces turned away, some crossed their arms, but others leaned in. I came here because my son came home from school last week, she continued, and told me he was afraid to say grace before lunch. Not because he didn't believe anymore, but because he was scared of being laughed at. The principal opened his mouth, but Emily didn't stop. "I've paid every PTA fee. I've sold cookies and raffle tickets. I've sat through school plays and folding chairs. And you're telling me I'm not welcome because I believe family and faith still matter?" A long silence followed. Then she turned slowly to the panel behind her. "You say you stand for inclusion. So include me." Her words hit like a quiet thunderclap, nothing flashy, nothing loud, just the raw power of someone who'd had enough. And just then, someone in the audience clapped, then another, and another. The sound built slow, hesitant at first, but genuine. Mr. Aldridge leaned into the mic with visible frustration. "We cannot allow this meeting to become a political circus." But before he could go further, a woman in the third row stood. "I'm not a Trump supporter," she said, hands shaking slightly. "But that mother just said what I've been too scared to say for 2 years." And suddenly, the crowd wasn't watching a conflict. They were becoming part of it. Barron watched quietly. Not gloating, not grandstanding, just listening. Because in that moment, Emily Harper wasn't being defended anymore. She was leading. The room hadn't yet settled when a voice rang out louder, sharper, and coated in rage. "Oh, please." It came from the left side of the room, where a woman in a bold red pantsuit stood, hands on hips, face flushed with anger. She took a step forward, eyes locked on Emily. "You talk about being silenced," she snapped. "Try raising a black child in this country. Try being gay in a small town. Your version of values has hurt more people than it's helped." Gasps scattered through the crowd, but she didn't stop. "And as for him," she jabbed a finger toward Barron, "let's not pretend like you're some innocent voice of reason. You were born in gold-plated privilege. Don't stand there and lecture us about courage." The words hung in the air like smoke-hot, bitter, choking. Barron didn't look away. He nodded slowly. And then, he stepped forward not to attack, but to clarify. "You're right," he said. "I was born with more than most. And maybe I'll never understand some of the pain others carry. But what I do know is this: using your pain to silence someone else's story doesn't heal anything. It just creates new wounds." The woman blinked, caught off guard by his calm. And then Barron looked out over the room, his voice measured, grounded. "We can talk about our differences without tearing each other apart. But if you think someone doesn't deserve to be heard simply because they pray, or believe in traditional family values, or respect the flag, that's not inclusion. That's domination." The principal grabbed his microphone again, voice rising. "This meeting is over. It's being hijacked by agendas that do not represent this school's mission." But the crowd wasn't listening anymore. A father stood, then a grandmother. A teacher near the wall. One by one, no shouting, no signs, just standing. Not for Barron, not even just for Emily, but for the right to be heard. And as the room turned toward the panel once more, it became clear. They had lost control of the narrative. Because truth had found its voice, the principal's face had gone red. His voice, trembling now not with conviction, but with desperation, echoed through the overhead speakers. "If this meeting doesn't return to order," he barked, "I will have no choice but to end it and request assistance from campus security." A low murmur swept across the room, half disbelief, half anger. That's when the scrape of a chair broke through the tension. An older man stood near the aisle. He wore a faded army jacket, his left hand gripping a cane, his right decorated with a silver wedding band worn smooth with time. He didn't speak loudly, but his voice carried. "You'll call security ... for what? A mother telling the truth? A young man defending her without shouting or cursing? That's your threat?" The principal froze, the microphone suddenly heavy in his hand. The veteran took a small step forward. "I didn't fight in Vietnam so school boards could silence parents. I didn't lose my brother so you could muzzle a kid because of his last name. You want to call someone? Call your conscience." The room erupted in quiet applause, slow, solemn, almost reverent. The red-suited woman from earlier folded her arms and sat back down. Emily had tears in her eyes now, but she didn't wipe them away. She stood straighter, steadier. Barron turned to the veteran, nodded with silent respect, then looked back to the panel. "You said this meeting was about progress," he said, calm but firm. "So let's progress. Let's talk. Let's listen. And let's stop pretending that parents like Emily are the problem when really they're just tired of being ignored." The silence that followed wasn't tense this time. It was reflective. A mirror held up to a room that hadn't expected to see itself so clearly. Just when the room seemed to calm, when even the most hardened faces began to soften, a sharp voice cut through the moment like a blade. "Oh, come on," said a younger man standing near the faculty section. Late 30s, stylish glasses, rolled-up sleeves, and a smirk that arrived before his words. A teacher, clearly. One of the cool ones. "This whole thing has turned into a campaign ad," he said, voice dripping with sarcasm. "Are we seriously applauding because Barron Trump gave us a lecture on values? What next press conferences in the cafeteria?" A few parents chuckled uneasily, but most remained silent. He wasn't done. "Let's be real," he continued, pacing slightly. "This isn't about free speech. This is about hijacking a meeting to push an outdated, exclusionary worldview. And sorry, but this is a public school, not a political soapbox." Barron didn't react. No smirk. No tension, just stillness. He let the words hang in the air, then, calmly, met the teacher's eyes. "If defending a mother from being silenced is a soapbox, then maybe this school should start selling subscriptions," he said. "Because a whole lot of people are clearly hungry for a voice." The teacher scoffed, shaking his head. "You're just using this place to score points with your father's base." That's when Barron stepped forward, just slightly. His tone shifted, just a bit firmer. "My father didn't send me here. I came because I believe in something that's clearly missing in this room: courage. Not the kind that shouts, mocks, or dismisses, but the kind that stands beside someone when it's unpopular." The teacher blinked. No one laughed, no one clapped, but no one interrupted him again. Emily watched Barron with tears in her eyes now, not from fear, but from something deeper. Something every mother recognizes when someone else protects what matters most to her. Dignity. Emily took a deep breath, her hands no longer trembling. She didn't need notes now. Her voice, though still soft, carried a weight that even the microphone couldn't amplify. It came from somewhere else. "Do you know what it's like," she began, "to feel like a stranger in your own community? To walk into a school where your kids spend most of their lives and feel like your values, your existence, are something to be apologized for?" She looked out at the crowd, not at the panel, not at the teacher who mocked her, but at the parents, the janitor, the teachers who were still undecided, the human beings. "My kids say, 'Yes, ma'am,' and 'Yes, sir.' They stand for the pledge. We pray before dinner, and that doesn't make us dangerous. It makes us consistent. And frankly, I'm tired of being told those things are controversial." The air in the room had changed. Not louder, not hotter, but clearer. "I don't hate anyone," she continued. "I teach my children to be kind always. But when kindness means letting go of your convictions, then it's not kindness. It's surrender." A pause. She glanced at Barron, then back to the crowd. "You want to know what real courage looks like?" she said. "It looks like a young man who could have stayed quiet, who could have sat back and watched me be humiliated, but instead, he stood up. Not because he needed applause, but because it was right." Several people in the room were wiping tears now. A few nodded silently. Even the red-suited PTA woman didn't speak. Emily stepped away from the podium, not needing permission anymore. Not seeking approval, just finished. And for the first time all night, the panel didn't say a word. Because there was nothing left to say. A heavy silence settled over the room after Emily stepped back. Not the kind that demanded a response, but the kind that made people think. In the third row, the red-suited PTA woman shifted uncomfortably in her seat. Her eyes darted toward the stage, then back to her folded hands. Her jaw was tense, but something in her expression had softened. Slightly. She didn't raise her voice this time. She didn't even speak. But the fact that she didn't defend herself now was telling. Barron stood beside Emily once more, not trying to retake the mic, not demanding the last word. He just stood with her, shoulder to shoulder. And that quiet image alone, no slogan, no soundbite, was louder than any of the arguments that had come before. The liberal teacher, still standing to the side, cleared his throat. "You're still wrong," he muttered, almost like a defense mechanism. Barron turned slightly, gave him a look that was neither smug nor angry, just steady. "You don't have to agree," Barron said. "But maybe tonight you saw something worth respecting, even if you won't admit it yet." He wasn't pushing. He wasn't grandstanding. Just planting a seed. The veteran from earlier gave a slow nod. The janitor leaned on his mop and whispered, "That boy's got more spine than half the school board combined." Emily smiled, not out of pride, but something quieter. Relief, maybe. Or the feeling of being seen again after years of invisibility. Outside the school's big glass windows, the evening had deepened into night. Inside, though something had shifted. Not everyone would change, not tonight, but enough had listened. And that was a beginning. The moderator looked down at his papers, unsure what to say. The principal tapped his pen but never spoke. Even the bold red-suited PTA woman now stared blankly at the floor. Her earlier certainty melted into something less defined. And then Barron stepped back toward the podium one final time, not to argue. Not to fight, but simply to close the moment. "I didn't come here to win a debate," he said. "I came here because I saw a mother trying to speak and being told to sit down. That shouldn't happen in America, not in a school, not anywhere." His voice didn't shake, but it wasn't cold, either. It was the kind of calm that comes from knowing you did the right thing, no matter the cost. He looked to Emily, then to the veteran, then to the crowd. "You don't have to agree with me," he continued. "But if we can't even listen to each other anymore, then maybe the problem isn't our politics, maybe it's our pride." He stepped away. And without a word, the audience began to stand, not all, but many. A quiet standing ovation. No cheering, just respect. Emily's hand found her heart. The janitor wiped his cheek. Even the teacher who mocked Barron lowered his gaze. And as Barron opened the door to leave the room, someone near the back whispered, almost to themselves, "That's what leadership looks like." Thank you for watching. If this story moved you, inspired you, or made you think twice, then don't just scroll away. Subscribe now and be part of something that still believes in truth, courage, and standing tall when it matters most. There's more to come. And we need voices like yours with us.